the dusty streets of McGill. Nevada had never seen a woman quite like Hannah Greene, who stepped off the afternoon stagecoach in the summer of 1883 with nothing but a worn carpetbag and secrets heavy enough to make her shoulders sag beneath their weight. Hannah was 22 years old, with auburn hair that caught the desert sunlight like copper wire and green eyes that darted nervously around the small mining town, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. Her dress, though clean and carefully mended, hung loose around her frame in a way that might have seemed modest to the casual observer. Only Hannah knew the truth behind the strategic alterations she had made with trembling fingers just 2 weeks prior, letting out seams and adding fabric, where her body had begun to change in ways she could no longer ignore. She was 3 months along, though she would tell no one. The father was back in Sacramento, a gambler named Thomas, who had sweet-talked his way into her heart and her bed before disappearing one night with her savings and whatever innocence she had left. Hannah had waited a month before accepting the truth that he would never return, and by then, she had missed 2 monthly courses and knew with certainty what had happened. Her Aunt Mabel lived somewhere in McGill, though they had not spoken in 5 years. It was a desperate hope that brought Hannah here, the kind of hope that comes when all other doors have closed. The mining town sprawled before her, rough and temporary-looking, with buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. Men outnumbered women 10-1, and those men stopped to stare as Hannah made her way down the wooden sidewalk, her boots clicking against the weathered planks. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the air thick and heavy. Hannah felt sweat gather at the small of her back and between her breasts, but she kept her spine straight and her eyes forward. She had learned in the past 3 months that appearing confident could sometimes create safety where none existed. The McGill Hotel stood at the corner of Main Street and what appeared to be the only cross street worth noting. Hannah pushed through the door, grateful for the relative coolness inside. A woman behind the desk looked up, her face weathered but kind, with deep lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent smiling. "Help you, miss. I am looking for my Aunt Mabel Greene. I was told she lived in McGill." The woman's expression shifted, sympathy flooding her features. "Oh, honey, I am so sorry. Mabel passed last winter. Pneumonia took her quick." The words hit Hannah like a physical blow. She gripped the edge of the desk, feeling the room tilt slightly. Her last hope, her only plan, dissolved like morning mist under the Nevada sun. "Miss, are you all right? You look pale. Let me get you some water." Hannah nodded, not trusting her voice. The woman hurried through a back door and returned with a tin cup filled with cool water. Hannah drank it gratefully, trying to organize her scattered thoughts into something resembling a plan. "You need a room?" the woman asked gently. "I have very little money," Hannah admitted, the words bitter in her mouth. "How much?" $12. The woman pursed her lips. "That will get you 4 nights, meals included. After that, you will need to find work or move on. I am sorry I cannot do better. This is a business, and my husband watches the books like a hawk." "I understand. Thank you for your kindness." Hannah signed the register with shaking hands, and the woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson, led her up narrow stairs to a small room that overlooked the street. It was clean but sparse, containing only a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair positioned near the window. "Supper is at 6, Mrs. Patterson said. "Come down hungry because we serve generous portions." When the door closed, Hannah sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry. She pressed her face into her hands and let the tears come silently, her shoulders shaking with the force of emotions she had been holding back for days. Then, precisely when her internal clock told her 5 minutes had elapsed, she wiped her eyes, smoothed her dress, and stood. Crying solved nothing. She needed a plan, 4 days to find work and a place to stay. 4 days to figure out how to survive in a town where she knew no one and had no prospects. 4 days before she would be desperate enough to consider options she did not want to think about. Hannah unpacked her few belongings, placing them carefully in the small dresser. At the bottom of her carpet bag, wrapped in a clean petticoat, was her mother's silver locket. It was the only thing of value she owned, and she had promised herself she would never sell it unless death was the alternative. She tucked it away carefully and changed into her only other dress, a gray cotton that was even more carefully altered than the one she had traveled in. Supper in the hotel dining room was a quiet affair. A few miners sat at separate tables, eating quickly and efficiently. Mrs. Patterson served beef stew with thick slices of bread, and Hannah ate every bite, knowing she needed to keep her strength up. The baby required nourishment, even if speaking that truth aloud remained impossible. After dinner, Hannah walked the town's main street as the sun began its descent behind the distant mountains. McGill was smaller than she had hoped, built primarily to support the copper mine that provided its reason for existence. She counted 2 saloons, a general store, a church, a blacksmith, and various other establishments that catered to miners and cowboys. At the far end of town, she noticed a small schoolhouse, though whether it was currently in session she could not tell. As she walked, Hannah became aware of the attention her presence attracted. Men stopped their conversations to watch her pass. Some tipped their hats politely. Others stared with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She quickened her pace and returned to the hotel as the last light faded from the sky. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Hannah placed her hand on her still flat stomach and whispered to the life growing there, "I will figure this out. I promise I will keep you safe." The next morning, Hannah rose early and dressed carefully. She needed to present herself as capable and respectable if she hoped to find employment. After a breakfast of eggs and biscuits, she began her search in earnest. The general store needed no help. The church had no paid positions available. The schoolhouse was closed for summer. By midday, Hannah's feet ached and her spirits had sunk to new depths. She sat on a bench outside the general store, trying to decide where to try next, when she heard raised voices from the alley beside the building. "I told you the payment is due today, not next week. And I told you I do not have it yet. The cattle sale fell through. Give me another month. Mr. Abbott does not give extensions. You know the terms." Hannah stood and peered around the corner. 2 men faced each other in the narrow alley. One was large and thick-necked, with hands like ham hocks and a face that suggested he enjoyed violence. The other was tall and lean, wearing dusty ranch clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his features. "Tell Abbott I am good for it. I have never missed a payment before. First time for everything. You have until sunset to come up with the money, or we start taking collateral. That pretty ranch of yours should cover the debt nicely." The large man pushed past the cowboy, nearly knocking him over, and emerged from the alley. He glanced at Hannah with cold eyes before continuing down the street. The cowboy remained in the alley, one hand braced against the wall, his head bowed. Hannah knew she should walk away. Getting involved in other people's problems when she had so many of her own made no sense. But something about the defeated slump of the man's shoulders called to her, perhaps because she recognized the posture. She had stood exactly that way when Thomas had left. "Excuse me, are you all right?" The man straightened and turned. Hannah caught her breath. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble and eyes the color of a summer sky. Dirt streaked his face and exhaustion lined his features, but beneath it all, Hannah saw decency and strength. "I am fine, miss." Just having a bad day." His voice was deep and rough, like gravel mixed with honey. That man seemed threatening. He was, but it is not your concern. The words were not unkind, just factual. "How much do you owe?" The cowboy laughed, a short bark of sound without humor. "Why? Are you offering to pay it?" "No, I have $12 to my name, but I am curious." $200. Might as well be 2,000 for all the chance I have of getting it by sunset. Hannah did quick calculations. $200 was more than most people saw in 6 months. "What happens if you cannot pay?" "I lose my ranch. 1,500 acres that my father spent his life building. I took out the loan to buy breeding stock after a harsh winter killed most of my herd. I thought I could rebuild and pay it back, but the cattle market collapsed last month. Now I am stuck between a rock and a hard place with no way out." "I am sorry," Hannah said, meaning it. The cowboy looked at her properly for the first time, really seeing her. His expression softened. "You are new in town." "I arrived yesterday, looking for someone." "My aunt, but she died last winter." "I am sorry for your loss." He paused, seeming to struggle with something internal. "My name is Henry Abbott. People call me Hank." "Hannah Greene." She did not offer her hand, mindful of propriety. "Any relation to Mabel Greene?" "She was my aunt." Mabel was a good woman. She used to bring preserves to the ranch sometimes, just to be neighborly. The world is poorer without her. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Hannah knew she should leave, continue her search for employment, but something kept her rooted to the spot. "Why did you tell me all that about your debt?" she asked finally. Hank shrugged. "I guess when you are about to lose everything, it does not much matter who knows about it. Sometimes it helps to say things out loud, even to a stranger." "I understand that feeling." Something in her tone made Hank look at her more sharply. "You running from something?" "No, running to something, but it turned out not to be here." "That is a lonely kind of feeling." "Yes." They were still standing there, two people who had revealed more than intended, when a young boy came running up the alley. "Mr. Hank, Mr. Hank, Pa says to come quick. One of the mares is foaling and she is having trouble." Hank was moving before the boy finished speaking. "Tell your father I am on my way." He glanced back at Hannah. "I hope you find what you are looking for, Miss Greene." Then he was gone, his long stride quickly carrying him down the street toward where several horses were tied. Hannah watched him mount and ride out of town, the boy running behind him, and felt an unexpected pang of loss. She shook herself mentally. She had no time for such foolishness. A handsome cowboy with troubles of his own was the last thing she needed. Hannah turned and continued her search for work. By evening, she had exhausted every possibility in town with nothing to show for it. McGill simply had no need for another woman's labor. The few women who lived there already filled what limited positions existed. Hannah ate her supper in silence, watching her precious days and dollars slip away. That night she lay awake calculating. 3 days left. Then what? She could try to reach another town, but that would cost money she did not have. She could write to acquaintances in Sacramento, but pride stopped her. They would ask questions she could not answer without revealing her shame. In 1883, an unmarried pregnant woman had few options, and most of them were terrible. The next day brought more of the same. No one needed help. No one had work to offer. By afternoon, Hannah found herself walking toward the edge of town, needing space and air to think. The land beyond McGill was harsh and beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush beneath an impossibly blue sky. In the distance, mountains rose like broken teeth. She was so lost in thought that she nearly walked into the horse. The animal snorted and sidestepped, and Hannah stumbled back, her heart racing. "Whoa there, easy girl." Hank held the reins of not one horse but 3, including a heavily pregnant mare. He looked even more exhausted than the day before, his clothes rumpled as if he had slept in them, dark circles prominent beneath his eyes. "I am so sorry, I was not paying attention." "No harm done. What are you doing out this way, walking, thinking? Any luck finding work?" Hannah shook her head. "None, and you? Did you find your money?" Hank's expression answered before his words did. "No, I have until sunset to vacate the ranch. I am taking what stock I can and heading north. There is land up by the Idaho border where I might be able to start over." "I am sorry." "Life happens. You deal with what comes." He studied her face and Hannah fought the urge to look away. "You look like you have not slept much. Neither have you." "The mare foaled last night. Took hours, but we got a healthy colt out of it, worth every minute of lost sleep." Hannah smiled despite herself. "You love it, don't you? The ranch, the animals. It is all I have ever known. My father taught me to rope before I could properly walk. After he died, the ranch was all I had left of him. Now I am losing that too." The defeat in his voice pierced something in Hannah's chest. Here was a man who had worked hard and played fair, being destroyed by circumstances beyond his control, just like her. "It is not right," she said fiercely. "You should not lose everything because of bad luck and timing. The world rarely cares about what is right, it just is what it is." Hank shifted in his saddle. "What about you? What will you do when your hotel money runs out?" Hannah had not told him about her limited funds, but apparently her situation was obvious. "I do not know yet. Something will work out." "Will it?" The question was gentle but direct. Hannah felt her carefully constructed composure crack slightly. "It has to." Hank was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those steady blue eyes. Then he said something that would change both their lives. "Come with me." "What?" "Come north with me. I need help with the horses and stock. You need work and a place to stay. It makes sense. You do not even know me." "I know you are Mabel's niece, and that is enough character reference for me. I know you are alone and need help. I am alone and need help." Sometimes the solution is just that simple. People would talk. Let them. "We will be 50 miles from here by tomorrow night. Who cares what McGill thinks?" Hannah's mind raced. Travel alone into the wilderness with a man she had just met. It was dangerous and improper and potentially disastrous. It was also possibly her only option. "I cannot pay you much," Hank continued, "but I can offer food, shelter, and honest work. When we get where we are going and I can start rebuilding, the pay will get better." "Why are you offering this?" Hank looked away, out at the distant mountains. "Because everyone needs help sometimes, and it is wrong to turn away when you can do something. Because Mabel was kind to me, and maybe I can return that by helping her niece. Because you look like you are carrying a weight too heavy for one person, and I understand what that feels like." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. Kindness, real kindness, had been so scarce in recent months that she had forgotten what it looked like. "I would need to collect my things from the hotel." "That is a yes." Hannah took a deep breath, making a decision that terrified and relieved her in equal measure. "Yes, meet me at the north edge of town in 2 hours. Bring whatever you can carry." When Hannah returned to the hotel, Mrs. Patterson was behind the desk. She looked up as Hannah entered, and something in Hannah's expression made her put down her pen. "You are leaving?" "Yes, I found work." "What kind of work?" "Ranch work, helping with horses and livestock." Mrs. Patterson frowned. "With who?" "Henry Abbott." The older woman's frown deepened. "Hank is a good man, one of the best, but Hannah, you cannot go off alone with him. It is not proper. I have no other choice. There are always choices. Not for me, not right now." Hannah met her eyes steadily. "I have 2 days of lodging left and no prospects. At least this way I have work and a roof over my head." "What are you running from, child?" The question, asked with such gentle concern, nearly broke Hannah's resolve. She wanted desperately to tell someone the truth, to share the burden she carried. But shame kept her silent. "Nothing I can fix by staying here. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Patterson. I will always remember it." She went upstairs and packed quickly. Her worldly possessions fit easily into the carpet bag. At the last moment, she remembered to check the dresser and found she had left nothing behind. Hannah changed into her sturdiest dress and her traveling boots, then took one last look around the small room that had sheltered her for 2 nights. Downstairs, Mrs. Patterson was waiting with a package wrapped in brown paper. "Food for your journey. Some bread, cheese, and dried meat. It is not much, but it will help. I cannot pay you for this. I am not asking you to. Just promise me you will be careful. The wilderness between here and Idaho is unforgiving, and a young woman traveling with a single man, even one as decent as Hank, can find herself in difficult situations. I promise I will be careful." Mrs. Patterson pulled Hannah into a quick, fierce hug. "If you ever need help, you write to me here. I may not be able to do much, but I will do what I can." Hannah hugged her back, fighting tears. "Thank you." Hank was waiting where he said he would be, with the 3 horses and a small wagon loaded with supplies. He had changed clothes and shaved, looking more alert than he had earlier. When he saw Hannah, something in his expression eased. "I was not sure you would come. I said I would. People say many things they do not mean." He helped her into the wagon seat, his hand steady and warm on her elbow. Her carpet bag went into the back with the other supplies. As they rolled out of McGill, Hannah looked back once at the small mining town that might have been her salvation, but had instead become just another closed door. Then she faced forward, toward the unknown north, and let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, things would work out after all. They traveled in silence for the first hour, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough terrain. The land around them was vast and empty, broken only by occasional clusters of sage and the distant shapes of mountains. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Hannah was grateful for the wide brim of her bonnet. Finally, Hank spoke. "We will make camp at Willow Creek tonight. It is about 10 miles from here. There is good water and grazing for the horses. How long until we reach where we are going? 4 or 5 days, depending on how the travel goes. Maybe longer if we hit bad weather, though that is unlikely this time of year." "Have you been there before?" "Once, years ago with my father. There is a valley with good grass and a year-round stream. No one has claimed it yet, as far as I know. It is remote, which means isolated, but also means no one will bother us." "Us," Hannah repeated, tasting the word. It felt strange to have an us again, even if it was just a business arrangement. "I know this is not what you planned when you came to McGill," Hank said carefully. "But I want you to know that you are safe with me. I am not expecting anything beyond honest work. You will have your own space, your privacy. I need help with the ranch, and that is all this is." Relief flooded through Hannah. She had not wanted to voice the fear that had lurked in the back of her mind, but Hank had addressed it directly. "Thank you for saying that. I figure honesty is the best policy from the start. Saves trouble later." They lapsed back into silence, but it was more comfortable now. Hannah found herself relaxing slightly, letting the rhythm of the wagon and the warmth of the sun ease some of the tension she had been carrying for months. Willow Creek was well named, with several large willows clustered around a clear stream that bubbled over smooth rocks. Hank unhitched the horses and led them to water while Hannah gathered wood for a fire. She had learned basic camp skills from her father before he died, and the knowledge came back to her now. As darkness fell, they sat on opposite sides of the fire, eating beans and bacon that Hank cooked in a cast iron skillet. The night air cooled quickly, and Hannah wrapped herself in her shawl. "Tell me about your family," Hank said. If you do not mind talking about it. Not much to tell. My father was a clerk in Sacramento. He died when I was 16. My mother had passed when I was young. I worked as a seamstress to support myself until I decided to try my luck with Aunt Mabel. It was not the whole truth, but it was not entirely a lie either. She had been a seamstress before Thomas. Mabel never married, Hank said. She told me once that she had been in love as a young woman, but he died in the war. She never found anyone else who measured up. That is sad. Or maybe it is beautiful. Some people are lucky enough to find that one perfect love. The tragedy is not in losing it, but in never having it at all. Hannah studied Hank across the fire. His face was shadowed, making him hard to read, but his voice held genuine feeling. Have you ever been in love? Once. Her name was Margaret, but she decided that ranch life was too hard and too lonely. She married a banker in Virginia City instead. I heard she has 3 children now and a big house on the hill. Do you regret losing her? I regret that I was not what she needed. But if I am honest, I think she was right to leave. We would have made each other miserable eventually. She needed social events and fine things. I needed open spaces and hard work. Sometimes 2 good people are just wrong for each other. That is a mature way of seeing it. Hank smiled, the expression softening his features. I have had 3 years to think about it. At the time, I thought my world had ended. Now I understand it just changed direction. Hannah poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Do you ever get lonely? All the time. But lonely is better than miserable. What about you? Ever been in love? The question hit harder than Hank could have known. Hannah kept her voice steady. I thought I was once. I was wrong. That is its own kind of painful. Yes. They fell silent again, both lost in their own thoughts. The fire crackled and popped, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. Hannah felt the baby shift inside her, just the faintest flutter, and placed her hand over her stomach instinctively before catching herself and dropping her hand to her lap. When she glanced up, Hank was spreading out bedrolls on opposite sides of the camp. You take the spot near the wagon. It is more sheltered from the wind. Where will you sleep? Over here by the horses. If anything spooks them during the night, I will hear it. Hannah settled into her bedroll, exhausted from the day's emotions and travel. Above her, the stars spread across the sky in a glittering blanket, more than she had ever seen in Sacramento. She fell asleep listening to Hank's soft humming as he checked the horses one last time, and for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. The next 4 days fell into a pattern. They rose at dawn, ate a quick breakfast, and traveled until noon. Then they would rest during the hottest part of the day, continuing on until dusk. The landscape changed gradually as they moved north, becoming more green and less harsh. Trees appeared more frequently, and the air grew fractionally cooler. Hannah learned about Hank during those days of travel. He was 25, just 3 years older than her. His mother had died giving birth to him, a fact that filled him with guilt even though he knew logically he bore no blame. His father had raised him alone on the ranch, teaching him everything he knew about horses, cattle, and the land. When his father died 2 years ago of a heart attack, Hank had been left with the ranch and a determination to make it succeed as a tribute to the man who had given him everything. In turn, Hannah shared carefully edited versions of her own story. She talked about her father's love of books and how he had taught her to read before she started school. She spoke of her mother in vague terms, having been too young when she died to remember her clearly. She described Sacramento with its busy streets and the boarding house where she had lived, but she never mentioned Thomas or the foolish choices that had led her to McGill. On the 3rd night, as they made camp beside a small lake, Hank surprised her by pulling out a mouth organ from his saddlebag. He played simple, melancholy tunes that seemed to fit the vast emptiness around them. Hannah sat by the fire and closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. "That was beautiful," she said when he finally stopped. "My father played. He taught me when I was young. I am not very good, but it passes the time." "You are better than you think." Hank smiled at her, and Hannah felt her heart skip slightly. Over the past few days, she had found herself increasingly aware of him, the way he moved with easy grace despite his size, the gentleness of his hands when he dealt with the horses, the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. She had to remind herself constantly that this was a business arrangement, nothing more. She was in no position to develop feelings for anyone, let alone the man who had offered her employment out of kindness. But her heart, it seemed, had not received that message. On the fifth day, they crested a ridge and looked down into a valley that took Hannah's breath away. It was perhaps 2 miles long and half as wide, with a stream cutting through the middle. Grass grew thick and green and trees clustered along the water. Mountains rose on 3 sides, providing shelter from the worst weather. "This is it," Hank said, and Hannah heard the emotion in his voice. "This is where we start over." They descended into the valley, and Hank immediately began pointing out features of the land. The best place for a house, elevated slightly to avoid flooding. The spot where a barn should go. The natural corral formed by rocks and trees that would need minimal fencing. "First priority is shelter," he said. "We can live in a tent while I build a cabin. Should take about 2 weeks if the weather holds and I work full days. I can help. Have you ever built anything?" "No, but I can learn." Hank looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. I will teach you." They set up camp that evening with a sense of permanence. This was not a stopping point on a journey. This was home, or would be. Hank erected a large canvas tent that would house Hannah, placing it near a grove of aspen trees. His own tent went up 50 yards away, providing appropriate distance. That night, as they sat by the fire, Hank pulled out a bottle of whiskey he had been saving. "To new beginnings," he said, offering it to Hannah first. She took a small sip, feeling the burn all the way down, and handed it back. "To new beginnings. I know this is not the life you imagined for yourself," Hank said. "Living in a tent in the middle of nowhere, working sunup to sundown, but I promise I will do my best to make it bearable, and when the ranch starts producing, you will get your fair share of the profits. You have already done more than I had any right to expect. You took a chance on a stranger, Hank. That means something. We are all strangers until we are not." Work began in earnest the next morning. Hank rose before dawn and woke Hannah with gentle efficiency. They ate a quick breakfast of coffee and leftover biscuits. Then Hank led her into the forest with an axe and a saw. "Pine is what we want," he explained. "Strong enough to hold up but easier to work with than oak or ash." Hannah watched as he felled the first tree, his axe biting into the wood with rhythmic precision. When it finally fell with a creaking crash, he showed her how to strip the branches and cut the trunk into manageable lengths. "Your turn," he said, handing her the axe. The tool was heavier than she expected, and her first swing went wide. Hank stepped behind her, not touching her but positioning himself close enough that she could feel his presence. "Watch your stance. Feet shoulder width apart. Let the weight of the axe do the work, not your arms." With his guidance, Hannah found her rhythm. The work was hard, harder than anything she had done before, but there was satisfaction in it. Each tree that fell was progress. Each log cut and stripped brought them closer to real shelter. They worked like that for 10 days, dawn until dusk, with only brief breaks for meals. Hannah's hands developed blisters that popped and bled before hardening into calluses. Her back ached constantly, and she fell asleep each night the moment she lay down. But the cabin began to take shape, walls rising log by log. Hank was a patient teacher, showing her how to notch the logs so they fit together tightly, how to mix mud and grass for chinking the gaps, how to shape the door frame and windows. They spoke little during the work, saving their breath for the labor, but Hannah found herself increasingly comfortable with the silence. It was companionable rather than awkward, the quiet of two people working toward a common goal. On the 11th day, Hank noticed Hannah moving more slowly than usual. She had woken feeling nauseated, a familiar sensation that she had been managing to hide for weeks. But today it was worse, accompanied by dizziness that made her head swim. "You all right?" Hank asked as she leaned against a log, breathing carefully. "Fine, just tired." "You look pale. Maybe you should rest today. We are so close to finishing. I can keep going." But an hour later, as she bent to lift one end of a log, the world tilted suddenly. Hannah felt her knees buckle, and then Hank's arms were around her, lowering her gently to the ground. "Hannah, talk to me. I am all right, just dizzy." "When did you last eat?" "Breakfast." "That was 5 hours ago. Stay here." He returned quickly with water and hardtack. Hannah sipped the water slowly, feeling her head clear slightly. Hank crouched beside her, concern evident in his eyes. "You have been pushing yourself too hard." "No harder than you. I am used to this kind of work. You are not." He studied her face. "You are also thinner than when we met." "Are you eating enough?" "Yes." It was not entirely true. Hannah had been giving herself smaller portions, partly because she did not want to seem greedy and partly because her morning sickness made eating difficult. But she could not explain that without revealing everything. "Starting tomorrow, you are taking the afternoons off. Work in the morning when it is cooler, then rest during the heat of the day." "That is not fair to you." "Fair does not matter. You passing out and getting hurt matters. I need you healthy, Hannah." There was something in the way he said her name that made her look up. Hank was watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with concern over a sick employee. For a moment, the air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Hannah was afraid to name. Then Hank stood abruptly. "Rest here. I am going to work on the roof frame." Hannah watched him walk away, his shoulders tense, and placed her hand over her stomach. The baby was still too small to feel clearly, but she imagined she could sense its presence. "Your timing could be better," she whispered. That evening, Hank cooked a large meal of venison stew with vegetables he had carried from McGill. He served Hannah a generous portion and watched until she ate every bite. "Better," he said when she finished. "You are being overprotective, maybe. But you are the only help I have got, so I am invested in keeping you functional." His tone was light, but Hannah sensed deeper feelings beneath the words. Over the past 2 weeks, she had caught Hank watching her when he thought she was not looking. She had seen the way his hand lingered a moment too long when he helped her over rough ground. She had heard the softness in his voice when he spoke to her in the mornings, and if she was honest with herself, she felt the same pull toward him. The way her heart lifted when she saw him smile. The comfort she felt in his presence. The warmth that spread through her chest when he laughed at something she said. It was dangerous. She had no right to these feelings, not with the secret she carried, but denying them was becoming increasingly difficult. "Hank," she said carefully, "why did you really ask me to come with you?" He looked up from his bowl, surprised by the question. "I told you I needed help." "You could have found help anywhere. Hired a ranch hand in McGill or picked up a drifter along the trail. Why me?" Hank was quiet for a long time, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "Because when I looked at you, I saw someone who needed saving as badly as I did. And because in 3 minutes of conversation, you made me feel less alone than I had felt in months. That seemed worth taking a chance on." Hannah's throat tightened. "I am not who you think I am." Who do I think you are? Someone respectable, someone worthy of kindness. And you do not think you are those things. I have made mistakes. Hank set down his bowl and looked at her steadily. Hannah, I do not know what happened to you before McGill, and I do not need to know unless you want to tell me. But I do know this. You are one of the hardest workers I have ever met. You have never complained, even when the work was brutal. You have pulled your weight and then some. Whatever mistakes you think you have made, you are paying for them 100 times over every single day. At some point, you have to forgive yourself. It is not that simple. Nothing ever is. But holding on to guilt does not fix anything. It just makes you miserable. Hannah wanted to tell him everything in that moment. The words pressed against her lips, demanding release. But fear held her back. If Hank knew the truth, everything would change. He might send her away. He might look at her with disgust or pity. She could not bear either. So instead, she said, "Thank you for understanding. I do not understand, but I am trying to." They finished dinner in silence, and Hannah excused herself early, claiming exhaustion. In her tent, she lay in the darkness and felt tears slide down her temples into her hair. She was falling in love with Henry Abbott, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it except watch it happen and dread the moment when he learned the truth. The cabin was completed 3 weeks after they arrived in the valley. It was rough but solid, with a stone fireplace, 2 separate rooms, and real glass windows that Hank had packed carefully from McGill. He gave Hannah the smaller bedroom, insisting he preferred sleeping in the main room near the door. "In case predators come sniffing around," he said. Human or otherwise. They moved in on a cloudy afternoon in late July. Hannah arranged her few possessions in the bedroom, overwhelmed by the luxury of having a door she could close, a space that was entirely hers. When she emerged, Hank had built a fire in the fireplace and was cooking dinner. "Welcome home," he said, and the words made Hannah's eyes sting with unexpected tears. "It is wonderful, thank you. We built it together. You did most of the work. You did more than you give yourself credit for." They ate dinner seated at the rough table Hank had built, using real plates instead of tin. It felt almost civilized, almost normal, and Hannah allowed herself to pretend, just for a moment, that this was her real life. That she and Hank were partners in truth, building a future together. But reality intruded later that night when she felt the baby move distinctly for the first time, a flutter that was stronger than before, unmistakable in its meaning. Hannah lay in her new bed with her hand on her stomach and faced the truth she had been avoiding. She was almost 4 months along now. Soon her pregnancy would become visible, impossible to hide even with altered dresses. She had perhaps a month, maybe 2 if she was lucky, before Hank would know. And then everything would fall apart. August brought hot days and cool nights. The ranch began to take shape around the cabin. Hank built a barn with Hannah's help, then corrals for the horses. He talked constantly about the future, about bringing in more cattle once they had sufficient winter stores, about breeding the horses, about clearing more land for hay. Hannah threw herself into the work, partly to be useful and partly to avoid thinking about her situation. She learned to ride, awkwardly at first but with increasing confidence. She helped Hank repair tack and mend fences. She planted a late vegetable garden near the cabin, coaxing beans and squash from the rich soil. And every day she fell more in love with Henry Abbott. It was impossible not to. Hank was kind and patient, quick to praise her efforts and slow to criticize. He made her laugh with dry observations about the horses' personalities and stories from his childhood. He brought her wildflowers he found on his rides, presenting them with an awkward shyness that made her heart ache. He treated her with respect and consideration, never pushing boundaries, always mindful of propriety. Hannah found herself watching him constantly. The way his hands moved when he worked with the horses, firm but gentle. The line of his jaw when he concentrated on a task. The rare, brilliant smile that transformed his entire face. She memorized the sound of his voice, the cadence of his speech, the way he said her name. She knew it was hopeless. Even if she had not been pregnant, she had nothing to offer a man like Hank. She had no money, no prospects, no family to speak of. She was an employee, nothing more, and she needed to remember that. But late at night, alone in her room, Hannah allowed herself to dream of impossible things. Of Hank knowing the truth and accepting it. Of raising the baby here in this valley, with Hank as its father in all the ways that mattered. Of building a real life, a real family. They were dangerous dreams, and she tried to push them away. But they persisted, stubborn as weeds. One evening in mid-August, they sat outside the cabin watching the sun set behind the mountains. The air was cooling rapidly, and Hannah had wrapped herself in a blanket. Hank sat beside her on the bench he had built, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I have been thinking," Hank said slowly, "about the future." Hannah's heart skipped. "Oh, we have been here almost 2 months and things are going well, better than I hoped, honestly. The valley has everything we need. The horses are healthy. We will have enough hay put up for winter. I think we can make this work." "That is good news." "It is. And I have been thinking about what comes next, about expansion and growth, about not being alone out here forever." Hannah held her breath, not sure where this was going. "I am not good with words," Hank continued, staring at the horizon. "Never have been. But I want you to know that these past months have meant something to me. Having you here working beside me, it has been different than being alone. Better." "Hank, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. "I know you came here because you had no other choice. I know this is just a job to you. But I wanted you to know that if you ever wanted it to be more, if you ever thought you could be happy here permanently, I would make sure you never regretted staying." Hannah's mind raced. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? "What do you mean by permanently?" Hank finally turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. "I mean as my partner, my wife, if you would ever consider it." The world seemed to stop. Hannah stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Henry Abbott was asking her to marry him. The man she had fallen in love with wanted to spend his life with her, and she could not say yes, not without telling him the truth first. "Hank, there is something you need to know. You do not have to answer now. I know this is sudden. Take your time and think about it." "No, you do not understand. I cannot give you an answer until you know everything." Something in her tone made Hank's expression shift from hopeful to concerned. "What is it?" Hannah stood, needing movement, needing distance. She walked a few paces away, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. When she turned back, Hank was standing too, waiting. "I am with child," she said, the words coming out barely above a whisper. Hank did not move. "What?" "I am pregnant, about 4 months along now." The silence stretched between them, vast and terrible. Hannah watched emotions flicker across Hank's face. Shock, confusion, hurt, and something she could not quite identify. "Why did you not tell me?" he finally asked. "I was ashamed, afraid. I did not want you to send me away. The father, gone. He left before I knew about the baby. I will never see him again." Hank ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps. "This whole time, these entire 2 months, you have been pregnant and said nothing. I am sorry. I know I should have told you, but I was so desperate, Hank. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. By the time I realized you deserved to know, I had already lied by omission for so long that telling the truth seemed impossible. So you were just going to hide it forever. Until one day you could not hide it anymore. I did not have a plan. I was taking it one day at a time, trying to survive. Hank stopped pacing and looked at her. Do you have any idea how this looks? I offer you a job, bring you out here alone, treat you with respect, and the whole time you are hiding something this big. What else are you lying about? Nothing, I swear. Everything else I told you was true. How can I believe that now? The question hit like a physical blow. Hannah felt tears start to fall, but she made no move to wipe them away. You are right. You have no reason to trust me. I will leave in the morning. I am sorry, Hank. I am so sorry. She started toward the cabin, but Hank's voice stopped her. Wait. Hannah turned. Hank was standing with his hands on his hips, his head bowed, clearly wrestling with something internal. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from anger to something softer. I should not have said that, not like that. You had every right to be angry, maybe. But anger does not help anything right now. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. How far along did you say? 4 months. Are you healthy? Is the baby healthy? The question surprised her. I think so. I have not seen a doctor, but I feel all right. Tired sometimes and sick in the mornings, but I understand that is normal. You have been doing heavy work, building the cabin, lifting logs. Could that have hurt the baby? I do not know. I tried to be careful. Hank was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Hannah never expected. If you stay, I will raise that child as my own. Hannah's legs went weak. What? You heard me. If you stay, if you marry me, I will be the baby's father in every way that matters. No one needs to know the truth except us. Hank, you cannot mean that. Why not? I want a family. The baby needs a father. You need a husband. It makes sense. It makes no sense at all. This is not your responsibility. You do not owe me anything. I am not offering out of obligation. I am offering because I care about you, Hannah. I have cared about you since McGill. These months working beside you have only made those feelings stronger. Finding out you are pregnant does not change that. But the baby is not yours. Biology is not what makes a father. My dad taught me that. He used to say that any man can create a child, but it takes someone special to raise one right. If you will let me, I want to be that someone for your baby. Hannah could not stop crying now, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. Hank closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she fell apart. His solid warmth surrounded her, and Hannah clung to him like a drowning person clings to a rope. Why would you do this? She gasped between sobs. Why would you take on someone else's mistake? Because it is not a mistake. It is a baby, a human life that deserves love and care. And because you are not a mistake either, Hannah. You are someone who got dealt a bad hand and played it the best you could. That does not make you less worthy of happiness. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do. And for what it is worth, I think I am getting the better end of this deal. I will get a wife who is strong and capable and who makes me laugh. I will get a child to raise and teach. I will get a family. That is worth more than anything else I can imagine. Hannah pulled back enough to look up at him. Hank's face was blurry through her tears, but she could see the sincerity in his eyes. You really mean this? Every word. People will talk. Let them. We will say we married quickly and the baby came early. It happens all the time. What if you grow to resent me, resent the baby? I will not. You cannot know that. Yes, I can. Because I am choosing this with full knowledge and open eyes. I am not being trapped or tricked. I am making a decision because it is what I want. Hannah searched his face, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none. Henry Abbott was offering her not just safety but a future, love, family. Everything she had thought she lost when Thomas left. I do not know what to say, she whispered. Say yes. Say you will stay. Say you will let me be part of your life and this child's life. Yes, Hannah said, the word coming out broken but clear. Yes, I will stay. Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it. Hank's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears with infinite gentleness. "Thank you. I should be thanking you. Then we are even." He kissed her forehead, chaste and sweet, then pulled her back into his arms. They stood like that as full darkness fell. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances, making promises that would bind their lives together. The next morning, Hank rode into the nearest town, a 2-day trip, to find a preacher. He returned with a circuit minister who agreed to perform the ceremony and ask no uncomfortable questions about timing. They were married in front of the cabin with the horses as witnesses, Hannah in her best dress, and Hank in a clean shirt he had saved for special occasions. The words were simple and traditional, to have and to hold for better or worse in sickness and health. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Hank kissed Hannah properly for the first time, and she felt her heart expand with joy and hope. That night, Hank moved his things into Hannah's room, their room now. He was gentle and patient, treating her like something precious. When they made love, it was nothing like her experiences with Thomas. Hank took his time, focused on her pleasure, whispered words of affection into her skin. Hannah cried afterward, overwhelmed by the difference between being used and being cherished. "Did I hurt you?" Hank asked, immediately concerned. "No, the opposite. You made me feel beautiful. You are beautiful. Even pregnant with another man's child, especially then. You are growing a whole human being, Hannah. That is incredible." The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Hannah's life. She and Hank settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together during the day, building the ranch. In the evenings, they talked by the fire or Hank played his mouth organ while Hannah sewed baby clothes from fabric he bought on his next trip to town. As her belly began to grow visibly, Hank treated the development with wonder and excitement. He talked to the baby constantly, telling it about the horses and the land and all the things they would do together. At night, he fell asleep with his hand on Hannah's stomach, hoping to feel movement. "I felt it," he exclaimed one night in September, his face lighting up with pure joy. The baby kicked. Hannah laughed at his enthusiasm. "That happens a lot now." "Can I feel again?" She guided his hand to where the baby seemed most active, and they lay like that until Hank finally drifted off to sleep. Hannah stayed awake longer, marveling at how her life had transformed. 3 months ago, she had been desperate and alone. Now she was married to a good man in a place she was beginning to think of as home. The baby was born on a cold February night in 1884, arriving 6 weeks early but healthy and squalling. Hank rode through a snowstorm to fetch the nearest midwife, a weathered woman named Mrs. Campbell, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. Labor was long and difficult. Hannah screamed and cried and cursed, and through it all, Hank stayed by her side, holding her hand and mopping her face with a cool cloth. When the baby finally emerged, a small but perfect boy, Hank cut the cord with shaking hands. "He is beautiful," Hank whispered, staring at the tiny face with awe. "He is so small," Hannah said, exhausted but alert. "Is he all right?" Mrs. Campbell checked the baby thoroughly. "He is fine. Small, but his lungs are good and his color is healthy. Early babies are tough. He will grow." Hank helped Hannah hold their son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would clearly be brown. Nothing like Hank's blue eyes, but Hank did not seem to notice or care. "What should we name him?" Hannah asked. "You choose. He is your son." "Our son," Hannah corrected. "And I want you to pick his name." Hank thought for a moment. "Henry, after my father, but we will call him Harry so there is no confusion." Hannah smiled through her tears. "Harry Abbott, I like that." "Harry Greene Abbott," Hank said firmly. "We honor both his families." In the months that followed, Hank proved himself to be everything he had promised and more. He rose in the night when Harry cried, walking the floor with the baby so Hannah could sleep. He changed soiled cloths without complaint. He sang lullabies in his gravelly voice and made silly faces until Harry laughed. Hannah watched this man who had no biological tie to her son give him more love than many natural fathers managed, and she fell deeper in love with him every day. Spring came, bringing new life to the valley. Hank bought more cattle and began building the herd. Hannah planted a larger garden and learned to make cheese and butter. Harry grew strong and healthy, his smallness at birth becoming a distant memory. One evening in May, as they sat outside watching the sunset with Harry asleep in Hannah's arms, Hank said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "How do you feel about giving Harry a brother or sister?" Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Are you asking what I think you are asking? I love Harry like he is my own blood, but I would like to have children with you too if you are willing. A whole house full of kids running around, learning to ride, helping with the ranch. I would like that too." Hank leaned over and kissed her, soft and lingering. "Thank you for saying yes that night. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for seeing past my mistakes. Thank you for loving us, always." 2 years later, Hannah gave birth to a daughter they named Helen. She had Hank's blue eyes and Hannah's auburn hair, and Hank was hopelessly smitten from the moment he held her. Harry, now a sturdy 2-year-old, was fascinated by his baby sister and insisted on helping with everything. The ranch prospered. Word of Hank's skill with horses spread, and people began coming from surrounding areas to buy breeding stock. Hannah's garden produced more than they could eat, and she began selling preserves and vegetables in town. They hired help, a young man named Tom who worked hard and asked few questions. Life was not always easy. Winters were harsh, and there were years when money was tight. They lost cattle to predators and weather. Harry and Helen had the usual childhood illnesses, each one sending Hannah into spirals of worry that Hank patiently talked her through. But through it all, they had each other. Hank never once threw Hannah's past in her face, never treated Harry differently than Helen. He was patient, kind, steady as stone. Hannah learned to trust not just Hank but herself. The shame she had carried for so long gradually eased, replaced by confidence and self-respect. When Harry was 7, he asked one day, "Pa, how come my hair is brown and Helen's is red?" Hank did not hesitate. "Because you are special. You got the best parts of both your parents." "What best parts?" "Well, you have your mother's smart brain and her kind heart, and you have my stubbornness and my love of horses." Harry seemed satisfied with this answer and ran off to play. Hannah, who had overheard from the kitchen, felt tears prick her eyes. Hank found her a moment later and pulled her into his arms. "He's going to figure it out eventually," she said. "Maybe. And when he does, we will tell him the truth. That sometimes families are made not by blood but by choice. That I chose to be his father, and I would make that choice again every single day. What if he hates me for lying? He will not. Because by then, he will understand that love is more important than biology. We will make sure he understands." In 1895, when Harry was 11 and Helen was 9, Hannah gave birth to twin boys, James and Joseph. The cabin had been expanded twice by then, growing into a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where the family gathered for meals. Harry and Helen were wonderful with their younger brothers, patient and helpful. Harry had grown into a serious boy who loved the horses as much as Hank did. Helen was wild and adventurous, always climbing trees and catching frogs. The twins were still too young to have distinct personalities, but Hank swore James would be a scholar and Joseph would be a troublemaker. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Hank gave Hannah a locket to replace the one she had sold years ago during a particularly hard winter. Inside, he had placed tiny photographs of all their children. "So you can carry them with you always," he said. Hannah cried, as she still did whenever Hank did something particularly thoughtful. "I love you so much. I love you too. Best decision I ever made, asking you to come north with me. Best decision I ever made, saying yes." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, the same view they had watched together for 10 years. From inside the house, they could hear the children playing, their laughter floating out through the open windows. When Harry turned 18, he sat his parents down at the kitchen table with a serious expression. Hannah's heart raced, wondering if this was the conversation she had been dreading for years. "I have something I need to know," Harry said carefully, "and I need you to be honest with me." Hank reached over and took Hannah's hand. "All right. Am I adopted?" Hannah felt the world tilt. "What makes you ask that? I have been thinking about it for a while. I do not look anything like Pa, and I overheard Mrs. Campbell in town once saying something about me being born early, but I did the math, and it does not add up right with when you got married." Hannah looked at Hank, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. Then she looked back at her son, her firstborn, and decided to tell him the truth. "You are not adopted. I am your birth mother, but Hank is not your biological father." Harry absorbed this calmly. "Who is?" "A man I knew before I came to Nevada. He left before I knew I was pregnant. I never saw him again." "Does he know about me?" "No," Harry nodded slowly. "So Pa chose to raise me even though he did not have to?" "Yes," Hank said, speaking for the first time. "And I have never regretted that choice. Not for one single second. You are my son in every way that matters, Harry. I love you just as much as I love Helen and the twins." "I know," Harry said simply. "I've always known that. I just wanted to understand the whole truth." "Are you angry?" Hannah asked, her voice shaking. Harry looked at her with eyes so full of love that Hannah started crying again. "How could I be angry? You gave me life, and Pa gave me a family. I have had the best childhood anyone could ask for. I am grateful, not angry." Hank stood and pulled Harry into a fierce hug. "You are a good man, son. I am proud of you." "I am proud to be your son," Harry replied. Later that night, after Harry had gone to bed, Hannah and Hank lay in their room talking quietly. "That went better than I feared," Hannah said. "He is a smart kid. He understands what matters. I was so afraid he would feel betrayed. The only betrayal would have been if I had treated him differently, because he is not mine biologically. But I never did, and he knows that." Hannah rolled over to face her husband, this man who had saved her in more ways than she could count. His face had lines now, marks of years spent working in the sun. His hair was shot through with gray, but his eyes were the same, still kind and steady. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking on someone else's child, marrying a desperate woman with no prospects, not even once?" "You gave me everything I ever wanted, Hannah. A family, a home, a purpose. I am the luckiest man alive. I am the lucky one. Then we are both lucky. How about that?" Hannah kissed him, pouring 17 years of love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life. Cattle were born and sold. Horses were trained and bred. Crops were planted and harvested. The children grew, each following their own path. Harry became a skilled horseman and took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations. Helen shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to be a teacher and went off to school in Virginia City. The twins were still young but showed signs of being natural ranchers like their brother. In 1905, when Hannah was 44 and Hank was 47, they stood together on the porch of the ranch house they had built with their own hands. Harry was married now, to a sweet girl named Sarah from town, and they lived in a cabin Hank had helped build on the far side of the valley. Helen came home for summers between teaching positions. The twins, now 10, were supposed to be doing chores but were actually sneaking off to go fishing. "We did all right," Hank said, his arm around Hannah's waist. "Better than all right. You know what I realized the other day?" "What?" "I've been happy every single day since I met you. Even the hard days, the days when money was tight or someone was sick. Underneath everything else, there was happiness. That is your doing." "Our doing," Hannah corrected. "I could not have built this life without you. We made a good team." "The best." They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The valley spread before them, green and lush, dotted with their cattle and horses. Smoke rose from Harry and Sarah's cabin. The twins' laughter echoed from the direction of the creek. Hannah thought back to that desperate girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in McGill 22 years ago, pregnant and terrified with nowhere to go. She could hardly recognize herself in that girl anymore. Life had shaped her, strengthened her, transformed her into someone she was proud to be. And it had all started because one cowboy had looked at her and seen not a mistake or a problem, but someone worth saving, someone worth loving. "Thank you," Hannah said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me when I needed to be seen, for offering me hope when I had none, for raising Harry as your own, for loving me when I did not love myself." Hank pulled her closer. "I should be thanking you for the same things. We saved each other, Hannah. That is how this works." She knew he was right. They had saved each other, two broken people who had found wholeness together, and from that salvation they had built something beautiful. A family, a home, a legacy. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they went inside to dinner, to their family, to the life they had created from hope and love and the simple decision to try. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night, and inside the house was light and warmth and the sound of children's laughter. It was, Hannah thought, more than she had ever dreamed of having. It was everything. The ranch continued to thrive as the new century progressed. Hank and Hannah watched their children grow into adults, each finding their own way in the world while remaining connected to the land that had shaped them. Harry and Sarah had 3 children of their own, and Hank became a grandfather who delighted in spoiling his grandchildren before sending them back to their parents. Helen married a fellow teacher and settled in Elko, but she visited often, bringing her husband and eventually her own children to the ranch for summers. The twins, James and Joseph, decided to go into business together, opening a mercantile in McGill that served the mining community. They were successful and generous, always making sure their parents had whatever supplies they needed. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of noise and chaos as grandchildren ran through rooms and adults tried to have conversations over the din. Hannah stood in her kitchen, the same one where she had prepared thousands of meals, and felt overwhelmed with joy. Hank found her there, slipping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "You all right?" "More than all right. I am perfect. Big crowd. The best kind of crowd, our crowd." That evening, after the children had been put to bed and the adults sat around the fire, Harry stood and raised his glass. "I would like to make a toast to Ma and Pa, who taught us what love really looks like, who showed us that family is not just about blood but about commitment and care, who built something from nothing and gave us all a foundation to stand on. Thank you for everything." "Hear, hear," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. Hannah looked around at all the faces illuminated by firelight. Her children, their spouses, her grandchildren sleeping peacefully in bedrooms throughout the house. Every single one of them existed because one desperate woman and one kind cowboy had taken a chance on each other. Later, as they prepared for bed, Hannah asked Hank the question that had been on her mind all day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not met that day in McGill?" "Sometimes, but not in a wishful way. More in a grateful way, understanding how easily things could have been different. I think about what would have happened to me if you had not offered me that job, where I would have ended up. It terrifies me. But you did not end up there. You ended up here with me, with our family. That is what matters. Still, when I think about how close I came to losing everything before I even had it." Hank turned to face her, his expression serious. "Hannah, listen to me. What we have built, it was not luck or chance. It was choice. I chose to offer you that job. You chose to accept. Every single day since then, we have chosen each other. That is what makes this work. Not fate or destiny, but deliberate, conscious choice." "I choose you," Hannah said, the words familiar from decades of repetition. "And I choose you," Hank replied, just as he always did. They held each other in the darkness, surrounded by the evidence of their choices. The house full of family, the ranch thriving outside, a lifetime of memories accumulated in every corner of their home. As Hannah drifted off to sleep, she thought about that frightened girl on the stagecoach one last time. She wished she could go back and tell her younger self that everything would be all right, that the terrifying journey into the unknown would lead to everything she had ever wanted, that the baby she was hiding would grow up loved and secure, that she would find not just safety but true love. But perhaps that younger Hannah needed to make the journey without knowing the destination. Perhaps the fear and uncertainty had been necessary to make her appreciate the joy that followed. In the end, it did not matter. Past and present had merged into a life well lived, a love well earned, a family well raised. And tomorrow would bring more of the same, one day at a time, one choice at a time, for as long as they both lived. Hannah Abbott née Greene fell asleep in her husband's arms, surrounded by love, exactly where she was meant to be. The little cabin that had been their first home together still stood in a corner of the property, preserved as a reminder of where they had started. But the ranch house where they now slept was testament to where they had ended up, built log by log, year by year, choice by choice. And in the morning, they would wake up and choose each other again, just as they had every morning for 25 years, just as they would continue to do for all the mornings to come. The story of Hannah and Henry was complete, written in the land they had cultivated, the children they had raised, and the love that had sustained them through everything life could throw at them. It was a story that began with secrets and fear, but ended with truth and joy. A story that proved sometimes the most broken people can build the most beautiful lives if only they are brave enough to try, and they had tried. They had succeeded. They had lived, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.